Here we have a monstrously thick, look at that, it's like 1/8 of an inch, Micarta neck knife, again in 440C, and I just spent the entire last video gushing about how excellent that steel is. And I'm going to do it again in this video. It's what pushes this knife over the line from just being cool to being completely monstrous. Alright, it has a sizable ricasso to about here. Not so much to be inconvenient, it still took a straight razor's edge just fine. The scales are Micarta, which is like cloth that's been laminated in layers in epoxy, so it leaves this kind of wood grain finish. But if you get really close up to it, my camera's probably not going to focus. Yeah, my camera's not going to focus. You can still see the individual threads of the cloth in the lighter portions. It's held together with torque screws on both sides, so if you feel like taking those off and making use of these holes here and here to put on a wrap, or these other holes here and here, you know, to your heart's content. The ridges back here, the Flint Striker, these were a little sharp for me, so I actually scraped the edges off of this portion because it was a little rougher on my thumb than I wanted it to be. Let's see, other modifications. Well, I mentioned it already, but I might as well tell you again. I used a carbide block to take the mill marks out for the most part, and then took it down to a 3-micron edge. Fits very solid in the hand. Alright, and for the lanyard, I put a figure-8 knot in the middle here to keep it centered, and on the other side, I put an adjusting bend right there, so you can make it a little bigger. That was my phone. So you can make it a little bigger, but under weight, it doesn't adjust. Like, I'm actually pulling quite hard there. There we go, size that back up. Alright, the fitting on this was actually incredibly tight. I had to struggle quite a bit getting this thing out of the sheath the first couple of times. It takes a little bit of warming up. I would recommend you bring it up to room temperature before you try doing that, because it's the fact that it was warmed up, literally, made it a little easier to work with. After about 10 draws, I was able to, just with the little thumb push, I can get that out. The grind is, let's see, yeah, the grind is a little wider on this side than it is on that side, in that it's higher up going this way. So I might sharpen from here that way, and a little higher up, maybe about there on that side. And it's also asymmetrical, like a lot of the knives in the ballistic series, leaning a little bit that way, so the shallow side it favors the shallow side, meaning that it's going to cut going that way rather than cutting going that way. It's a very minor difference, and if it's supremely sharp like I've made it here, you're probably not even going to notice. Being 440C, you can really beat the hell out of this thing. Like, it did not take much. After I put it through the paces, it did not take much maintenance to get it back up here. I think I sharpened it for a grand total of about half an hour. That's all by hand for you following along at home. Let's see, a final modification that I just remembered. I took a piece of aluminum and scraped it across the etching here to keep it from rusting, because the texture in the etching is very likely to retain moisture, so giving it a little coating of aluminum is going to reduce that. Although it does make all the text a little harder to see. This has replaced my heavily personalized neck knife as my main everyday carry, despite being a little heavier. This is... Oh yeah, by the way, you may have noticed there are screws here. Completely forgot about this. Alright, I did test the belt clip. It is this little tab right there is designed to catch on the belt itself so that it doesn't have any problems when you're drawing it from your belt. It's not gonna, even when it's tight up like this, it's not gonna take the sheath with it. The sheath will actually stay pretty firmly on your belt, assuming it catches on that little lip right there. It's pretty easy to get on and off, as long as you can dodge the little catcher there. And if you're like me, when I feel like getting around to it, I'm going to take these screws out after a while and relace this with a push-button release paracord. I might demo that in a later video. Alright, so total verdict on this: best neck knife that I've had so far. A concern that I was suddenly reminded of is if you have larger hands, you're going to need to grab it with the 3 fingers there and push. Don't worry about the edge though, because your finger will fall right there. Alright? Even if it doesn't, there's a sizable ricasso that I mentioned earlier. This portion right here isn't actually sharp. You can, if I find the lighting spot, you can see a little bit of shine right there. Yeah. So, drawing that out like that, you're not going to cut yourself, even if you're clumsy. Excellent fit. I keep having a closing note to throw onto the end of these videos, something I forget to mention in each of these. I'm trying to avoid doing that. Alright, if you watch the balance, it's a little bit back from perfect center, which is ideal for a Ralph Thorne style throw, which is another advantage to this thing. Being 440C, it will take the beating from throwing it without much complaint, as opposed to your run-of-the-mill 440A steel. Just another thing to love about a fantastic knife. I cannot gush about this thing hard enough.